Hello, everybody. Good morning. Uh, Welcome to the webinar, Uniden Laser Radar Stealth Integration in Ferrari. So we are thrilled to have you all here today. So my name is Marcio Knapik. I will be your host for this session. Please note that this webinar will be recorded, and at the end of the session, we will have a dedicated Q&A round. So we encourage you to write down any questions you may have during the presentation. I will be happy to address them at the end, and we are trying to provide detailed answers. So today we have a special guest with us, Josh Ritenour, owner at Masterpiece Automobile. So welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
So maybe we can just maybe wait 1 or 2 minutes to wait more people to join. And Josh, can you briefly introduce yourself and how you got started using the 3D scanning in your workflow?
Yeah. So my name is Josh Ritenour. I have a couple businesses, but I started working with cars about 3 years ago, and I ended up, kind of being introduced into scanning just in relation to developing a higher level of integration with a lot of the work that we do. And I've tried out some other scanners, some like lower cost ones and whatnot. And it was about a year ago that I was introduced to Peel, and that's when I would probably say that my 3D scanning journey started, because it was at that point that I really started to utilize and integrate it into our workflow.
What kind of projects are you typically working on today?
So, we do kind of a wide array of projects, from, full interior, CAD design, to a lot of electronics integration, high-end audio systems. And then about a year and a half ago, we started focusing a lot on the integrated laser radar systems on vehicles. So kind of just about anything in relation to cars, that outside of any sort of mechanical or body work, mostly like interior and integrated components involving electronics. So.
And at what point did you decide to adopt the Peel3.CAD scanner and the Peel3.CAD Pro software?
So I was at a mobile solutions class a little over a year ago, and Gabby, when she was with Peel, was doing a demo, and that's when I really saw the not only the value in the Peel scanner, but more so into the software, and that's when I was first introduced to it. And once I kind of did a little bit more research on it, that's when I kind of made the leap to start working with, and to purchase a Peel and start integrating it into our workflow.
And can you share some details about your Ferrari project?
Yeah, so we do a lot of laser radar systems in high-end vehicles, and the project that this webinar is focused on, we had another client of ours that we had done a laser radar system we've done multiple laser radar systems in his vehicles, and he had a friend that had purchased this new Ferrari 296 GTS, and wanted to have some protection in the vehicle so he could actually enjoy it with without worrying about the good old lawman and speeding tickets. So he came in, and he was very adamant about maintaining the aesthetics of the vehicle, making wanting to have whatever system that we put in it integrate with the vehicle and not look out of place, and you know, basically be, you know, stealth as we call it, so that it, you know, virtually disappears with the aesthetics and the styling cues of the vehicle. So
Can you describe a typical scanning workflow when working on LiDAR integration?
yeah, so when we're doing LiDAR integration, laser radar in vehicles, you know, typically the workflow starts with scanning the vehicle and the areas specifically that we want to integrate the components into. So oftentimes that's, you know, front bumper, rear bumper, and certain interior components, depending on, you know, where we're mounting a display or a controller. And then, you know, getting a little bit deeper into the workflow, you know, we scan the bumpers on the vehicle first, and then we'll remove the bumpers and scan both sides of the vehicle, or both sides of the bumpers. And then within the Peel OS CAD software, then we will merge those together to create, you know, our front and back sides that are all aligned. And then, you know, once we have all of that done, then we, I suppose, do you want me to go into like the alignments and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, before you even start the scanning process, how do you prepare the vehicle or
Oh,
the part for?
okay. So before we start the scan process, we, you know, we clean up all the surfaces, make sure there's no dust, debris anywhere on. So we have a, you know, so we're capturing as accurate of data as we possibly can on those surfaces. So we clean everything with isopropyl alcohol, and then we'll use the scanning targets, which are the little dots that we put, you know, all over the surfaces to, you know, once again, accurately capture all that geometry. And then obviously bumpers are, you know, shiny reflective surfaces, and doesn't always lend well to, you know, capturing that scan data. So then we'll use like a sub scanning spray that will allow us to capture those reflective surfaces.
So basically, do you physically add any reference object to the car to help with the
Yeah.
alignment?
So one thing that we've found is, you know, in order to create accurate alignments, which is very critical for the integration of these laser radar components, in, you know, specifically the laser transponders. You know, we throughout our process, we determined that we need to have a more accurate way to create some of those surface planes, because bumpers on a lot of these cars don't give us any geometry that's, you know, perpendicular, you know, flat to the ground, etc. So you can see in the picture of the front of the bumper of the Ferrari, it's one of our little jigs that we use. So what we do is we align that, you know, oriented to the bumper to create those planes, and then we capture that data in the scan, and then that gives us kind of a jump start to all of our alignments, where we don't have to try to, you know, use the geometry of the vehicle itself that might not be ideal for us to capture that. So.
And what is the data that you capture, and how long does it take for each project? For example, a bumper.
You know, a front bumper, front and back, you know, will probably take us, you know, somewhere in the, I mean, if aside from removing the bumper, you know, the actually disassembly part of it, the actual scanning process of, like, let's just say it was a front bumper, is probably, you know, 30 minutes front and back.
Okay, 30 minutes. And what are the tools inside of Peel3.CAD Pro that you rely on the most? Reference planes, alignment, or clean up the
Well,
mesh?
I think, you know, from a workflow standpoint, the initial thing that's most important is to, you know, clean up any of the surfaces of the mesh initially. And that is, you know, if there's any like holes or any areas that, you know, the scanner, based on looking through, you know, maybe like on this Ferrari, there was a grill mesh on the front that that it wasn't able to capture some of the stuff. So between the front and the rear scan, when we merged them, I went back in and I filled some of those holes, smoothed the mesh in any areas that had a little bit of texture. And then all the alignments are, the alignment is the most crucial part of the foundation of the scan, because once you have that scan and you want to import that into your CAD software, Fusion is what we use. You need those alignments so that all of your orientations are accurate. And then, the most crucial part, in my opinion, is the auto surface of in the PeelOS software that allows you to create a volumeless body that you can import into Fusion, that you can then either use as a surface that you create a body off of, or you can use that as basically a slicing surface to nest parts to perfectly fit to the vehicle.
So the features, I think, how do you use those features? Alignment, reference, geometry, simplify your workflow.
So, once we have those alignment planes created and we import those into Fusion, then we know that, when we import our transponder file, whether it's, in this case, Uniden, I know with 100% certainty if I align that laser transponder to that plane, that I can build the body off of that, and that transponder is in perfect orientation to optimize the performance of it.
And once you extract surfaces in Peel3.CAD Pro, how does your workflow look like in Fusion 360?
So I import the surface, we'll import the scan and then import all the entities, and all the entities are going to be any of your planes, your surfaces, your silhouettes, anything like that, and it'll import it as, certain ones come in as bodies, surfaces come in as bodies, silhouettes come in as sketches, and then any of the planes come in as construction planes. So once that is imported into Fusion, that's typically when we start modeling, the pods, where I'll import in the CAD files of the transponders or whatever component we're integrating into the vehicle, and start moving those. And we know based on the scan data as reference that, where our tolerances are for placement, depth, width, all that stuff. And we kind of generally place those transponders where we want them for optimized coverage, but then obviously for any sort of interference of any other components of the, bumper in this case. And then once we have that transponder, kind of in place, then we start modeling the actual shape of our integrated pods in Fusion. And then once we've created that, then we'll either one of two things, either use that surface as a cutting plane to cut that body that we've created within Fusion that gives us that perfect nesting fit. Or sometimes, depending on the application, we'll actually use that surface as a face of one of our bodies, and then use surface informs to, as another way to create a body within Fusion. That then once we've created those, then we can send those to, our FDM 3D printer to run a part to test fit. And then once we validate fitment and aesthetics and anything like that, then we can go and do our final print, which we do on an SLS resin printer.
Josh, do you mind to show us your workflow in the Peel3.CAD Pro or your computer?
Yeah. So I can share my entire screen. So you can still hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so like this is my typical workflow, like on my computer, where I'll have PeelOS Pro on one side and I'll have my Fusion on the other side. So on this one, let's see if I have. So on this one, I've already done all the alignments and I've kind of cleaned up. I can go back into like the actual scan file that kind of shows you, and this was merged. So this was a front scan and a back scan so that we could capture, you know, all of the interior parts of that. And this, you know, shows all the extra stuff kind of around it. This was our jig that we used that I ended up cleaning up some of the stuff so it's not there anymore. But this is, you can see if you zoom in, that's where our orientation is right there. So we have our X, Y, X, Z, and Y, Z planes. That's how we created our alignments. And then once we go into the CAD Pro software, you know, you can see our orientation and alignments right there. And then what I would do is, you know, like, you know, go in and use some of the tools like, you know, smoothing mesh where, you know, on an area like this that we use, I can go in because it's got some areas that are not that smooth. And then I just kind of go through and, you know, start cleaning those up. And then if it's something like, you know, this type of area, a lot of times I'll just go through and delete that. And then I'll go up to fill holes, and I'll just start, you know, going through, you know, filling some of the holes, or if there's like little spikes. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can solve the same problems within the software, but this is just kind of like my process to do it. You know, so I can go through and, you know, kind of clean some of that stuff up. And I could go through all of this and do it, but for the sake of the, maybe I can just go quick and go through some of this and smooth this out. You know, and then I can go back into some of this stuff and kind of clean this up. This might not be the best example to show, but that's getting kind of funky in there. But you know, in this area that we created, if you can see on the right side where there's this outer pod. So if I go in here and hide my scan, this is showing you auto surface that I created right here. This was an auto surface that I created for the center pod. And how that's done within PeelOS is there's just this feature right here, auto surface. And then I typically reduce the size of the patches down to, you know, 500 or 600. And then I'll kind of select an area that I want to create that auto surface that my part is integrating with. And then I just click preview, and then it will show me what it's creating surface related. And then I hit OK. And then now, once you're in here, now I have this surface right here, which is essentially, you know, over in Fusion, what I imported in. And then I can go right over to my entities here. And then all you have to do is right click it, and then you can transfer directly into Fusion, and it will import that in directly related to all of your orientation of all your other parts. And that's why I think it's important for people to, because I work back and forth between these two softwares. So, you know, sometimes when I have, you know, maybe I created a surface and my design kind of changes a little bit, and maybe initially I didn't capture, you know, enough of this rear portion. I can go right back into Peel, redo my surface, and then import that in, and I can work back and forth. It's not like a one and done type thing where you can do it one time and then you're kind of stuck, and then you try to import something in and it's not aligned. I think that's why it's very important to, you know, do all of your alignments and make sure all of your alignments are really dialed in within Peel, so that once you get to the modeling within Fusion, any of your imports are going to be directly aligned. Because once you move anything, if I were to move this mesh in any way, if it was off a, you know, 2 degrees, and then I go to import something in, it's no longer going to have a direct reference to that initial import. So yeah, so you can kind of see in here how, this is the surface. So I can go and turn that surface off, and you can see how it split that body that, follows the compound contours um, of that. And you can see within the scan too, right there, how it nests perfectly against all of that.
So it's the perfect fit at the first time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect fit first time. And, we've talked about it, Marcio, and I talked to a lot of other guys in the industry that, have used different scanners, or they ask me like, what scanner do you use? Well, Peel. Well, it's too expensive. And, I can get this Einstar or this, blue light scanner for $1,000. Well, that's great. But what everybody has been doing is then taking that scan data into Fusion and then going in and creating mesh section sketches, which are essentially silhouettes. So basically follow a line profile around here, and then you would do multiple lines, and then you would loft between them. And yes, you can create surfaces in that fashion, but it's never going to be 100% accurate to a compound contour. The amount of time you're going to spend trying to recreate this scan using sketches, using forms, using surfaces, using any of those tools is going to be hours upon hours upon hours, and it is still not going to be 100% accurate. Whereas with the auto surface feature within Peel, it gives you that in one function.
Right. Yeah, because at the end it's going to be an average of all the lines you extracted, right?
Yeah, because if you think like every one of these lines, it's not a perfectly straight line. So it's, it's this way and it's this way, and you have, curvature going, in multiple different directions. So the idea of trying to recreate that from a sketch and modeling standpoint it's a daunting task. I mean, it takes, and that's how I used to do it, before I, started using the Peel. And the amount of time that you spend trying to model accurately using the scan as a reference is, I mean, you're talking, I mean, there was projects that would take me 14, 16, 18 hours to remodel, whereas now I can do it in a matter of 30 minutes from start to finish. So from an efficiency standpoint and an execution standpoint, it's saving you time and it's giving you a far better outcome that's 100% accurate every single time.
Yeah.
And that's the fun of it. And then this is like, this will show you kind of the rear, same type of thing with the surfaces that we did and the modeling we did for the rear transponder pod. So
one of the questions we have is how do you manage to import those heavy models into Fusion?
how do you import the models into Fusion?
And how do you import and how do you maintain the smooth performance? Because people see it's lagging. You have too many points on it. So how do you
Okay.
work with the mesh and the
Okay, so let me go back to my front bumper scan right here. So as you can see right now, when I can sit and rotate that, this is not a decimated file. This is a full mesh scan. I didn't do anything to it. But you notice as I hover over it, it's not giving me, it's not allowing me to click on it. And the first thing that I do once I bring a scan in is I go down and I make it unselectable, where now it's selectable. This is how it comes in within Fusion. So now when you move it around, it's very laggy. It's slow. And all that you do is when you import your scan in, which is the first thing I import, the first thing I do is go down and make it unselectable. So then it's no longer lagging the software. Your software isn't going to freeze up. It's not going to slow down. It's not going to crash. Now, if you're doing like a full interior or you're doing a full car, yes, you are going to want to decimate your scan within Peel to reduce that file size, because just the actual the file size on a full, like on a very complex scan, like of a full car or full interior, it does need to be reduced in size because that will slow Fusion down. But I mean, this is a very detailed scan, you know, front and back. It's a fairly large file size that I have no issue in relation to moving it around or modeling. So, but you know, in relation to the question of importing, so I just opened a new Fusion window or file right here. So then I would go in over here into Peel under my scan, and I'm just going to go through and send that to Fusion. And it will import this into Fusion. So there's my scan. And then I go into the bodies like I just touched on, and I will go and right click on this and I'll make it unselectable. Now, if I go back into here, I can go through and I can right click on my entities. You have to import them separately. You have to do the scan and the entities separate imports, but I can right click on my entities and I can transfer these to Fusion. And then it's going to bring all of those in directly oriented based on my alignments that I created within Peel. So now if I turn my scan off, I have my the surface that I created in there. And then I have my construction planes that I had created on my initial, and you can see that they're perfectly aligned with the origin within Fusion. So it's as easy as that. Now, if I wanted to go back into here and then create, you know, like another, let's say I wanted to auto surface, you know, this area over. Let's see.
I have a quick question for you. Is there a best way to create reference planes into the scan area? Is there a minimum distance from the scanning area that we should have?
I'm not sure I'm following.
Is there a best way to create the reference planes? So I think you mentioned before you have your jig, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, within, let's see, within the Peel software, so you have like, you know, how you create the planes is under the entities. So, I mean, I have the ability to create a plane off of, you know, multiple different ways. Like I can do it based on the geometry of the mesh, which is this. So I could just go and, you know, select this right here and it'll give me a plane off of that surface. Otherwise, I could go in and I could select, you know, 3 vertices. I could, you know, do 3 points to create a plane off of that. Most times what I do, like I said, is once I'm in the, you know, when I have this, then I would just select this as a plane, this as a plane, and then this as a plane. And then it's an immediate, you know, I have those 3 planes and then I just go back into my alignments right here. And then within the alignments, it'll let you select whichever, you know, planes that you have created, and then you do all your alignments. So your XY, your YZ, and your XZ.
Thank you, Josh.
But yeah, so like over here, if I, you know, like I just created, you know, if I create, you know, quickly a new auto surface, is just the value of being able to work back and forth between the softwares. You know, so if I wanted to create a surface right here, I could go through and create that, and now I have another surface in my entities which is right here, and then I can go and I can transfer that to Fusion, and then it'll bring it right back in. So it imports it right in. So I think that's one of the best parts about the workflow is just being able to work back and forth between the two softwares, so seamlessly and efficiently that you can, start modeling, and then if you need anything additional that you can't do within Fusion, you can just go right back into Peel and, and create any workflow. Or let's say it was something that, I needed to fix this little hole right here. I could go into I can go right into Peel and fill that hole, resurface that, send it back in, and it just makes it very smooth and efficient.
Yeah. And how much time do you estimate to you save using Peel and Peel.CAD Pro compared to traditional workflows?
So, I would say a year ago, prior to using the Peel, if we were doing a laser radar system and I was using one of the old scanners that I had, I would probably have 12 to 16 hours into the scanning and then trying to recreate a surface that I can actually build a body off of that once again wasn't 100% accurate. So it was a lot of time. Like a full laser radar system would take us a full week to between the design process, the assembly, disassembly, and installation of all the components. Whereas, now, I think that Ferrari was about a 3-day project, and that was a very, it took a little bit more time because the amount of detail in relation to disassembly on how those cars are assembled with, every single bolt has a different, amount of shims for spacing on it. So having to like label, bag, and tag every single component of assembly, disassembly, and taking, countless photos and videos of everything that we did so that we knew taking it off and going back on was going to be 100% put back the way that it was. So, that was a, 3-day-ish project from start to finish. I just finished up a Golf R that we did a front only system on, and from scanning to design to full install was less than a day. And that was, fully 3D printed test parts, resin printed finished parts, and then, all the paint, finishing, and installation of it was, just a little bit over a day. So from an efficiency standpoint, it's, the amount of time that it saves on a daily basis, because we've integrated it into our workflow and, in most of our projects now, it saves, the amount of work we can get done in a short period of time and deliver, the highest end outcomes. It's indescribable.
What impact does this have on the accuracy and rework?
Yeah, I think that's an important one too, especially, guys that are coming from an analog background, if you're an analog fabricator and you're, even the very, very high-end analog fabricators, you could get 8-10 steps down, through your process in a project and, maybe realize that there was something that you didn't take into consideration and for fitment, and then you have to modify where you kind of have to undo a lot of those steps and redo. Whereas, with the scanning and CAD design, you're solving all of those problems in a digital environment where where all of your interferences are, where all of your problems are, and you solve all of those in the digital environment. And then the next benefit being is that if you create a CAD design part, if anything were to happen to that part, I maintain that digital asset. So let's say I do let's say this Ferrari gets into an accident and it has to, one side of it has to be redone. Well, I have those digital assets. I don't have to recreate that. All that I have to do is reprint, refinish, and reinstall them. So, that's just one aspect of when you're doing high level, digital design, like those assets become very crucial and very important. And I think it's a big selling feature for, customers too. And, knowing that, hey, if anything ever happens, like we can replace that just like an OEM, like if you went to a dealer and needed a new part, like that's the level of detail and importance of having like a digital file, on interior parts. Like let's say we're doing door panels and, a car gets in an accident or, something happens to a door panel and it gets damaged. Well, we can, just reprint that. We can recreate. If it's a speaker grill, we can recreate that, as opposed to if it's analog, you have to go back and like maybe you had created specific jigs or a press to press a mesh grill or, something along those lines where, the amount of time to recreate that is essentially the same amount of time that you spent on the initial one. And it's a waste of time.
Right. So it helps on the repeated orders as well, right? So you have that digital asset and then reuse the same.
I think that's an important thing to touch on too, is like once I create one of these systems for a vehicle, if I ever see that vehicle again, like I don't have to go through and redesign that, because I know with 100% certainty if it's the same bumper, these pods are going to fit on that bumper. So whether it's, other industry colleagues that that I have that, oftentimes like if I see a vehicle that, I'm not going to see, multiple 296 Ferrari GTSs in a year at this time. But if another, one of my colleagues that's in another part of the country or in a different country sees one, I can share that file with him. And, then, it's that digital asset, that has value that you create. And you're creating products. You're creating something that, can be recreated seamlessly, an unlimited amount of times after you, create that initial model. So.
All right. Maria, can you share one of the projects, the video with the project with Josh? I think that video is great as well. So that's the Ferrari project, right, Josh?
Yeah, those are some finished photos of the Ferrari once it was completed. It's kind of a cool little display and controller mount that we did.
We can barely see it, right?
I mean, that's the idea, in a lot of states, laser shifting is frowned upon, otherwise known as against the law. So the idea is to, not only make it look like it's it's hidden in an integrated part of the vehicle, but flows with all the aesthetics that are existing on the styling cues of the vehicle themselves. So.
Right. Any recommendations to ensure better downstream CAD results, or any tips and tricks you use?
Um, I mean, there's just a lot that you learn, like once you kind of incorporate it into your process. I mean, the more that you start using the scanning and CAD design in your workflow, the more efficient you become. In relation to, like, tips and tricks. I mean, I think a lot of the tricks are essentially just the basic functions within Peel3.CAD Pro that, I mean, it solves so much of the issues in relation to fitment and things like that, to get really, really precise, that handshake where you create a part that nests perfectly to whatever vehicle application that you're working on.
For someone working with custom integrations or automotive projects, why should they consider adoption this workflow?
I mean, if you're doing anything on a high level, or your desire is to do things at a high level, there's no other way to create these outcomes other than having a high-end scanner with the software that supports it, and CAD modeling.
And do you see this workflow becoming standard in custom integration or automotive design?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole reason, like, I got into working with cars, about 3 years ago. I have a commercial fabrication business that I do a lot of interior architecture and things like that. And, I've always been a car guy my whole life. And, I just saw that there was a handful, a couple guys in the industry that were doing things at a very high level, using a lot of the, digital design and engineering, processes. And I just saw that there wasn't a whole lot of people that were kind of taking that lead. And I saw that that's kind of where the industry was going, was, a lot more technology based and a lot more, digital computer aided design. And, that's why, that's what my love of this is, constantly developing and progressing, and, trying to build and grow as a designer, as a fabricator, to, create the best, the best components, the best integrated parts, the best systems. That's where my passion really is, and my obsession, obsessive drive is, to just constantly get better and constantly create better and create better outcomes.
And how scalable is this process if someone wants to apply it across multiple projects or teams?
I mean, it's very scalable. I mean, are you talking in relation to, like, production scalability, or are you talking in relation to scalability from just incorporating the process into, someone's workflow?
I think in production standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, from a production standpoint, a lot of, I mean, I have multiple vehicles that I've come across that, maybe the job we were doing on it wasn't directly related to an idea that I had, where I will scan, there was a couple vehicles that I ended up scanning that we weren't even doing anything on the vehicle that required scanning, but it allowed me to capture that data of a vehicle that, might be popular. It might be something that's new that not a lot of people have seen. And then being able to create products, for that vehicle, or having that scan data that, sits in my, library on the cloud. And then if I ever have an idea, or somebody ever needs, might have a car in another state, or, a car that they want to bring in, it's like I have all of that I have all those digital assets that are sitting there, that then I can just, back reference to, and then create products from, where, I've created numerous products that I've sold, 100 of, where, it's something that I created one time. I never You know, obviously the dream is to create a product and sell thousands of them, but you know, sometimes you create a product and you might do it one time. Sometimes you might create a product or a part that, you know, is, you know, highly desirable, and, you know, you end up, you know, selling a bunch of them. So.
Right. So let's see if we have any questions. I don't see any other questions. So to close this, for someone working with the custom integrations or automotive projects, why should they consider adopting this workflow?
The most important part, and I tell this to everybody because I get calls and messages all the time about what scanner do you use? And I say Peel, and they say why? And I'm like, it's because of the software. Like, you can buy a lot of other scanners, you can buy, you know, they can all capture scan data, but what do you do once you have that scan data? And that's where I think Peel, the strongest part of Peel is the software, what it allows you to do in relation to efficiency and workflow and save time with that scan data. So that's I always tell people, you're paying for the software, you're not paying for the scanner. Like, the software is what you're buying, and the software will pay dividends, and it'll save you a ton of time, a ton of time. It'll pay for itself in very short order.
Right. So Josh, where can people see more of your work or get in touch with you?
You know, I'm on social media. I have a couple Instagram accounts. My kind of personal kind of portfolio page is Phenom Designs, and then I have Masterpiece Automobile, which is the business one that's just it's a newly launched social media page. So there's content that's constantly being updated every day. But if you want to see just more of my kind of a snapshot of my work, on Phenom Designs on Instagram has a fair amount. Otherwise, our website has a fair amount of content of our projects, and that's masterpieceautomobile.com.
Just there's two more questions that came out. What is the benefit to using Fusion over the Peel.CAD Pro software for creating your parts?
In my particular case, it's because I've already been fairly invested within Fusion. So I already knew and understood the Fusion software. So for me to learn an additional software in relation to modeling, it didn't make sense. I have played around with the Peel3.CAD software, and there is some, you know, you can do a fair amount of CAD modeling, and I'm sure that I know that in the future there's going to be, you know, additional progressions of that software to allow for more modeling. And I think that that's a huge play for Peel, because people that might not be currently invested in Fusion, they might not use that software. You know, that Peel3.CAD Pro is essentially going to at one, you know, at some point be a one-stop where you learn one software and you can do everything in that one environment. In my case, it's because I already was fairly proficient at Fusion, and I understood a lot of the things within Fusion, and the importability from Peel into Fusion was so seamless that that's just how my workflow, you know, that's just how my workflow works.
There's another question from my notes. Josh was importing scan data into Fusion throughout Peel OS. I was under the impression that this feature wasn't available. Yeah, the feature to export to Fusion is available. You cannot export the timeline, but you can export all the entities, cross sections, auto surface, and the mesh file as well. So there is a direct transfer to Fusion.
Yeah, and the only thing that, you know, that I believe you can't do is, like, you currently are unable to export the modeling features within Peel3.CAD Pro into Fusion. I think if you're a SolidWorks user, I think that there might be some options in relation to that. But once again, like what my workflow is, I don't ever feel like I'm limited with what the entities that can be exported into Fusion. Like I don't feel like I'm missing anything. Like I feel like I can capture any data that I need to have as my baseline to start modeling within using those entities with the planes, the silhouettes, sketches, auto surfaces, all that stuff is importable.
I have a question that feel free to answer or not. How much did you charge the customer for the project, and how did the breakdown per hour? Did the stack allow you to provide more value for the customer?
I won't get into exact pricing on things. And I think it's important to note that when you increase your efficiency and your outcomes, that doesn't mean that a project, costs less. If I become very proficient and I can do a task that normally took 10 hours and the market, call it, ten to $15,000. If that project normally takes a week and I can, shorten that period down into 2 or 3 days, but still deliver the same outcome, I don't charge, I don't charge less because I've invested the amount of time to become more efficient and improve, on all those different levels. So.
Any suggestions or what kind of projects can be used to teach digital CAD to undergrad students?
Repeat that.
Any suggestions or what kind of projects can be used to teach digital CAD to undergraduate students?
I mean, I guess it depends on like the industry, because obviously like, scanning is used in, we're talking automotive, but it can be manufacturing, it can be medical, it can be a lot of different things. But, when it comes to, if it was like product design, any of that stuff, I mean, I think you could use it on just about anything. I mean, you could take a kid's toy. I mean, you could literally look around your room and just, what do you want to create? Like, what do you want to model? And like that could be, kind of the test subject of it. When I got into my CAD design, like when I jumped down that rabbit hole, like I would just model whatever was around me. I would take a pop can, I would take, a mouse, a screwdriver, like whatever was around me, and try to figure out how to model that. And I think that when you start to encounter different, complex things, you just learn more, and you learn, your different approach on how you want to kind of tackle a project. Where you do that enough, you create an efficiency and kind of a mental database where, if you have a new project in front of you, you can pull from all of the learning experiences and obviously improve efficiency. So.
Yeah. Another question, the tech is expensive. How does it provide a good ROI?
Everything's expensive, but like, how does it create an ROI? So we talked about earlier, like if I'm doing a laser radar system, prior to having this the Peel setup with the scanner and the software, if that took me typically 18 hours of scanning and design, and now I can do that in 3 hours, that's 15 hours of my time that I have back that I'm not charging less for, but I'm also creating more efficiency and better products. It's time. Like time is more valuable than money. And I think that if you look at things, if you're never going to win. Like I always tell people, you'll never win the labor game because there's only so many hours in a day. How much can you get done in a day if you're more efficient? So if I can get, 2 projects in a week, 3 projects in a week, that I can create efficiency, more efficiently because of my process, that's my ROI, because I can do more work and create better outcomes in a shorter period of time.
Josh, we don't have any more questions. Maria, do we have another slide? We can. Thanks for your time, Josh. Thank you, Josh, and it's very nice to have you. We're gonna have a Peel Garage in Minneapolis at Masterpiece Automobile in August 14th. And you guys are welcome to join us. You also have a Masterpiece discount code as well, so we can't see it very well, but discount if you wanna.
Yeah, so Santa came early, so if anybody's looking for early Christmas presents, you can get a very rare discount on not only the Peel scanner but the Peel software, and it applies across the platform regardless of which setup that you're purchasing. So
Remaining question, I don't know. What is the goal of the radar system? Hide it or fit it in the bumper?
the goal, well, you have a couple challenges. You have to obviously mount laser transponders, and what the laser transponders actually do is they prevent a police laser gun from getting a reading. And then the whole idea is to make them as hidden as possible. In the images you see here on the displayed thing with the three vehicles, the photographer made those surfaces reflective so they could highlight where that is, but in real life those actually disappear and you don't really see them. You don't really want those to be a prominent, thing that you see on the car. Our whole idea is to hide those and make them look like they don't even exist.
Thanks, Josh. No remaining questions. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. See you. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Bye-bye.